So Steve, tell us about yourself and your background and what an industrial designer and artist does all day.
Well, an industrial designer is a designer who designs things, objects, computers, bikes, skateboards, scooters. Sometimes we design small buildings, we design things on the streets, we design cars, we design space rockets. It's a very broad design discipline. And my background is in ecological design. So working on projects, in my case, aiming to bring nature back into urban environments. So to work out how to make cities and towns, streets, good places for other species as well as us to live in. And also water saving systems, composting systems, food producing systems, basically devices that help us make cities green.
How did you how did you wind up doing this? What was the thing that made you say, this is what I want to do with my life?
It's a really great question. I mean, it just seems exciting. It's what I've always done. As a child, I built cubbies in the garden, and I was always building models and drawing and always imagining weird and wonderful machines. And I've just never really changed. So I have just found work in Australia, in Melbourne. I worked for many years for a wonderful organization called Ceres Environment Park. And at the time there, we built a small team of people who were developing projects to demonstrate zero emissions futures. So we had large scale community composting. We had a biogas system to produce energy from food scraps. We had electric vehicle conversions. We had urban wind projects. We had hydroponics and aquaponics, and concentrating solar thermal, so big dishes that track the sun to focus sunlight. And these were all demonstration projects to explore what a zero emissions Melbourne could look like. So I spent many years working on demonstration technologies there and have been a freelancer for a long time working on projects. And yeah, bit by bit, I started doing more and more conceptual artwork around looking at the future, looking at where cities could go and how we could rapidly transition cities to incredible jungle cities. And that took the form of exhibitions and eventually a book. And I thought the book would take me a year, and it took me 7 years. So here we are with Ultrawild after a lot of exploration and discussions with scientists and engineers and lots of dreaming. And yeah, eventually here we are.
I have so many questions about Ultrawild. I had read that it took 7 years, and I'm dying to know everything about that. But I'm also really curious how you make the leap from, maybe it's a really straightforward leap actually, from creating all these sort of conceptual ideas, creating demonstrations, uh, creating examples of what the world could look like. How do you go from doing that in, I guess, the physical space to going, I'm going to make a book about this. I'm going to create a book now that does this. How do you
Uh,
end up there?
well, for many years, I was doing design work, so design and engineering work with engineers and scientists, and I'd often do a lot of educational work on the side. So I'd lead tours through our workshops and get people excited about the ideas. And bit by bit, I realized that in a way was what I did best. So I come from a family of teachers. My parents are both teachers. My grandparents are almost all teachers, and I think it's sort of in the blood. And maybe I'd rebelled against it, and now I'm being sort of drawn back into the fold. But I really love explaining ideas. I love engaging people with science and maths and physics. And I think that at this point in history, we need all the engagement in those areas that we possibly can get. And so it's always been something that I've loved doing, engaging people, making science fun, having a laugh, creating comedy science, comedy design. It's just something I've always done. So right back to high school and primary school, I was drawing weird and wonderful, machines that went badly wrong and exploded and all that type of thing. And I just kept doing it.
So 7 years
Hmm.
from I guess idea to
Yeah.
finished product.
Well,
What
yeah,
happened in
yeah.
7 years?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it certainly doesn't sound reasonable or sensible, but it doesn't really sound believable either. But it is a fairly common story in terms of graphic novels. I mean, Ultrawild isn't a novel. It's a kind of popular science. It's a book about real world things, but it is a graphic novel style, and it's just an incredibly labor intensive process. Not only the creation of the pages, so all of the layouts, but also because it's a book about inventions that could be made, the research and the process of exploring all of those ideas is just enormously time consuming. So, and all the ideas kind of dovetail together. So the backstory of the project of the book is that I had an exhibition in Tokyo, which was it was a solo show of models and drawings about weird and wonderful machines which could help transform Tokyo into a food producing city to feed its 40 million people. And I returned from that show to Melbourne, and the incredible people at Allen and Unwin said, "Would you like to turn this into a book?" I said, "No problem. I can knock this over in a couple of weeks if I wanted to." And at that point, I was imagining simply taking the Tokyo ideas more or less and sort of adapting them for an Australian context. But bit by bit, I realized that those ideas were all discrete ideas. They were just sort of standalone concepts that weren't connected. But bit by bit, I realized that I needed the ideas to sort of work together because I was creating a singular vision for cities as ecosystems. So that's one of the big things we want, is for cities to act as ecosystems. So we want waste. We want, people talk about a circular economy. We want waste to be reused. We want to generate our energy within the city. We want heat that's produced from the process of generating electricity to be used for something else. So everything has to be circular. And I realized that the ideas, the inventions had to all be connected. And that was where I set myself up for many years' work, because it's one thing to create a bunch of random ideas, but it's another thing to make them all work together as an ecosystem. And I'd find there'd be a problem with one of the ideas, and then that would affect something else, which would affect something else. I'd have to change that. And of course, the rules for the book are it primarily has to be funny. It's a comedy. It has to engage the reader, and it has to be joyful, because we face so much despair in our world at the moment with climate change and biodiversity collapse and so forth, that I wanted to, from the beginning, I knew it had to be a comedy. It had to be fun. It had to be a page turner. It had to be something that was really joyful to read. And the second thing is that the ideas had to be possible. So they had to all scientifically, some of them maybe have to squint a little bit, but theoretically they could all work. So it had to be funny, had to be possible, and they had to all tie together. And I wanted to sort of, and the other thing was, as I kind of got through the process, in about 2019, we had the bushfires, of course, around Sydney, and Melbourne's skies were blanketed with ash from Sydney, and the situation with climate felt so overwhelming. There was a point where I didn't really know that I could produce a book that was, taking a light-hearted look at solutions for climate change. And I realized that not only did I have to connect all the ideas as an ecosystem, but that there was a narrative that ran through the whole process. And it was my narrative. It was a journey of me as a designer, grappling with not only how we develop these ideas, but also with the realities of climate change and species extinction. And so there's some dark points in the book, and there's a narrative which takes you from sort of ludicrous optimism of like, no worries, we can transform this stuff all tomorrow, to wow, this is pretty big, this is actually going to be quite difficult, through to at the end of the book discovering all kinds of new things that are going on around the world, real projects that I think are so hopeful, that I hope leave the reader feeling empowered and inspired. And so that narrative journey, it wasn't there originally in the book. It's something that I sort of brought into the book, which caused me, took years, added years to the process, because it's one thing to have fun ideas, another thing to have fun ideas that all work, another thing to tie it all together in a narrative which works. So, you know, there were loads of projects that I spent years on that I had to cut, and other ones that I had to include to make the whole thing kind of work. Yeah, so that's where the 7 years comes in, you know, and it's weird. It just flies by, you know.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you can see all the work in the book. You are basically creating a new future in it, right? You're inviting people to build an
Mm.
entirely new way of living, an entirely new way of thinking about the world, and also introducing, as you say, like those ideas of, you know, discovering that there's a problem, grappling with sort of the stakes of the problem. What can we do with that? Are we going to be able to find hope and joy in this? It mirrors a process that, you know, you hope that readers are going to go through in their lives, that you hope they're going to come away with feeling like change is possible, that
Yeah,
there are ways that we can sort of rewire and remake our world. And you do that in one book, all of that in one book, which is really remarkable. And obviously that creates a lot of opportunities for teachers who need to cover a lot of ground. But you also can't just talk about climate science or climate change without grappling with the fact that we are people who have reactions to that information and have emotions attached to the world, and that we also need to create a sense of custodianship and belonging and love for the natural world as well at the same time. And you're doing all of that in
yeah.
this really dense but completely accessible book. It's really incredible.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, the plan was really from the beginning to create an ultimate STEM resource. You know, how can I create a book that engages kids and adults in all of the areas that I think are really important for going forwards for a sustainable future. So I had a whole list of things that I wanted to cover in the book, you know, everything: solar energy, geothermal energy, wind energy, composting, food production, creating habitats in cities for other species, dealing with recycling, new ways of producing plastic, new ways of building things without using enormous amounts of resources, biomaterials, yeah, electronics, AI, robotics, physics. Yeah, it's all in there, I hope. I mean, there's heaps more that I could have put in there, but yeah.
I just keep wanting to add more questions. How did you're doing all of this, you're synthesizing all this information, you're inventing things, you're relating all those inventions to each other so that they work in harmony, you're building a narrative, you want to address all of these complex topics, and these STEM topics, and you're doing it for young readers primarily.
Yes.
What was your process in going, this is primarily for young people. This needs to be accessible to young people. The
Mm.
language, the
Sure.
descriptions, those things need to create a world for them. How did you go about creating that element?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked with students for about 20 years. So I have, for a long, long time, run programs in schools as a kind of designer in residence. So turning up and spending a day or a week, or in one case, I worked with a school for about 4 years on a single design project, which was transforming a part of their school into a pizza making laboratory. One of my favorite projects of all time. So, and these projects involve working with the students, so teaching them design skills, teaching them how to draw, teaching them how to draw in 3D, how to make models, how to model on the computer, collecting things from the environment, bones, sticks, leaves, using these as inspiration, that type of thing. So for years and years, I have worked with kids of primary age and secondary age as a designer, as a kind of an artist in residence. So I guess I'm drawing on all of that. It also helps that you know, a big part of me is a very immature sort of an adult, so I'm still sort of operating on the level of a, you know, of a 9-year-old in many ways. Yeah, and I don't know. My wife's a primary teacher. She teaches the upper 2 years of primary school, so there was a lot of running things past her. but also with some of the more sensitive issues. So, for example, around engaging kids with the realities of climate change, I did a lot of research to make sure I was pitching things in the best way that I could, and yeah, working out what, how much should you, how much of the big awful facts do you convey, and actually, I mean, the book does take the reader to a pretty dark place, and I decided that essentially it seems like the best research suggests that kids know about climate change from a very young age anyway, and so you're best to empower them, not lie, not try and dumb things down, or try and sort of put rose-tinted glasses on, actually tell the truth, but show that there are enormously positive things going on as well, because they already know the reality. They've heard their parents talking about it. They've seen it on the news. It's inescapable. I mean, it's terrifying. When I was 9, I essentially knew nothing of the world. I was just playing with sticks and pulling apart old radios and things. I didn't live an adult world at all, but I think kids these days do to a much greater extent. So in the book, I do really go there with explaining climate change, but I think I've done it in a way that leaves kids empowered, I hope. So who knows? I'm getting a lot of good feedback so far, and I haven't had any jaded teachers or parents telling me that I've traumatized their students. So far so good.
My next question was actually about the feedback that you might have received from young readers. What do they say to you after they've picked up this book? What do you hear from them most
I
often?
get a lot of students writing to me, telling me that they've about their ideas. Each chapter of the book ends with a section entitled "Design This Next." So it's all about you, the reader. You've just read my chapter about the sewer submarine, or the 3D printer bird, or the compost cannon, or the flying bike. And I wanted to be sure that I wasn't suggesting that I'd solved everything. I very much wanted the ideas to be delivered as a kind of, here's a starting point, but we've got a long way to go, and I invite you as a reader to kind of continue my design work. So at the end of each chapter, you've got a sort of 20 or 30 ideas for things that need to be further developed. I get a lot of kids engaging with those, writing to me and saying, hey, I've got this idea for my own flying bike, which is really, really beautiful. A lot of parents saying that they have been amazed that their quite young child has sort of disappeared into their bedroom and spent a long, long time reading it. The book has developed a bit of a sort of niche following in kids who are incredibly smart, who sort of have brains kind of oozing out their ears, that kind of thing. I do workshops with a class of 30 kids, and the kids are all into the ideas, but there'll be 2 or 3 at the end of the class who come up to me and who are just dying to tell me, everything that they know about, thermonuclear reactors or something bizarre. So there's those kids out there that are just kind of got brains operating on another level, and who crave detail, and who often don't find that in the majority of kids' books. So my wife is a teacher, as I mentioned, and she had a little girl in her class a few years back whose parents were buying university biology textbooks for her, because she wasn't getting enough from the books in the library. So and she's an amazing artist and designer, and so often it's kids like that who will really, really get into Ultrawild.
It's a really great point, actually, that any units that teachers can create on this book can be sort of scaffolded and differentiated to meet students at their different sort of entry and exit points of knowledge and skill development, right? Because there's a lot that you can explore in the book, but then there's also a lot of extension work that you can do, and a lot of skill building work that you can do. So it becomes that really exciting opportunity to address all student needs and all student levels of knowledge.
I hope so. I mean, I put a lot of poo humor in there. You know, like I mean, my job when I go into a classroom, my job is to be the silliest guy in the room, and so my ideas are always explosions, poo, limbs being blown off, this type of thing, because it's about having fun, but B, in this world where kids fear being bullied on social media and so forth, there is often a lot of fear around having a ridiculous idea. And so my job is to show kids that no idea is too stupid. And so there, as much as there is a lot in the book for extremely bright, gifted children, there is a lot of just absolute base level stupidity, which I hope just kind of works with everyone. You know, a gentleman emailed me a few days ago. He said he was a scientist and he appreciated the science angle of the book. And he said that his 5-year-old has been reading the book, which is bizarre. And I feel kind of terrified that 5-year-olds are reading about solutions to climate change. But it does seem to be engaging some kids who are considerably younger than I thought would engage with the book.
It's fantastic. And now I have to ask about, I guess, the meat of the book, right? The way that it works. You just won the Australian Book Design Award for Best Designed Children's Nonfiction Book. Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing. And this book is just a visual smorgasbord, right? There's a lot going on, but it's so beautifully designed. I would love, can you walk us through what these pages look like, how you put that together? Obviously, design, illustration, creation, this is all very much what you do. So it's all beautifully calibrated, harmonized. But how do you put these pages together? How do you communicate these ideas in, just a couple of pages?
Sure. So the book has a series of different page styles. Some pages are simply full spread illustrations of future cities, of ultra-wilded future cities. And I should say that we didn't explain the kind of concept early on, because rewilding and ultra-wilding are not terms that are common in Australia and in New Zealand. But rewilding is a conservation philosophy, which is basically about giving nature a leg up, so helping ecosystems reform. So that might be removing invasive pest species or reintroducing keystone species that are vital for ecosystem functionality. So whether that be bringing platypus back into a creek, or here where I am in Wellington in New Zealand, reintroducing kiwi into the hills around the city. So there are many species we need to bring back, the species we need to remove, and in plants and animals, of course. So helping ecosystems rebuild, and then importantly, stepping back and allowing nature to repair itself and to thrive on its own terms. So that's rewilding. And this book, of course, is about ultra-wilding. And ultra-wilding is about doing all of that, so rebuilding ecosystems, but with the help of technology, A, to make things happen faster, but B, to bring ecosystems back successfully into urban environments, which is a big challenge because it means humans coexisting with nature. So you need structures to enable nature to operate, to animals to live safely, animals to have homes. You need structures to help you build gardens on roofs or gardens up walls and all kinds of things. So that's the sort of overall framing of the book. So in the book, in terms of the page layouts, some pages are full page spreads, giving you a sort of allowing you to dive into a future Sydney, a future Tokyo, a future Beijing, a future London, a future Wellington, and in various stages of ultra-wilding. So those are sort of more traditional picture book spreads. And then the rest of the pages are a kind of a comic book layout or a graphic novel layout. And the hope is that they work as a comic, so they're readable in a comic format, but they also have a kind of a sketchbook look to them. So they're designed to drop you as a reader into my design process. So some drawings are quite refined, some are quite rough and scratchy, and every chapter begins with a design thought experiment in a big, bold font. that gives that is a kind of a signpost to the reader for the design challenge that's being solved. So one of them, for example, is, once cities are filled with jungles, that's great, but it'd be really difficult it would take ages to ride anywhere. Could we build flying bikes and fly around jungle cities? So there's the thought experiment, and then the pages take you through the process of, well, how would you make a bike fly using our bodies to power them? It's very difficult to power a bike that flies. So how would you do it? How do you launch the bike? How would you design the bike? What would the wings look like? Would they fold away, etc.? So that's the overall sort of feel of the book. And other design thought experiments are, could we transform all of the world's toilets into compost making machines that help bring fertilizer into the city to grow plants? Could we transform every one of the world's many billion traffic lights and lampposts and pylons into effectively fake trees, so create artificial habitat to provide safe places for birds and insects and epiphytes and other parts of nature. So that gives you a bit of a feel, but it's about posing a question, and then you as a reader following me through that design journey, and then ending with a big spread of like, here's what it would look like. Here's what it would look like to live in London with artificial trees created for birds, with the animals coming back, and with 50 years from now, sort of in a wild, ultra wild London.
I guess my last question is a bit about all the worlds that you've created in this book, but also about how we're hoping to have our readers leave the book feeling empowered, feeling hopeful, feeling excited to sort of go on a journey to make a more sustainable world, right? What can they do after reading this book? How can they channel that great energy into doing something next?
There's a few things. So as I mentioned, each chapter ends with a bunch of provocations, a bunch of design challenges. So you can finish the book or finish a chapter, and you can immediately start drawing and extending my ideas, coming up with your own ideas inspired by what you've just read. The second thing is the book. Every project, so every project in the book is theoretically possible, and on all of the major projects, I have done some basic maths and physics on how the ideas would work. So how would you launch a flying bike? How much power do we have to lift a bike into the air? How would we do that? How would they actually fly? You can go and check out the maths on the flying bike project by downloading my spreadsheets. So this is where it gets into a kind of a high school territory, or an extension for maybe the upper years of primary school. A teacher who's got kids who are really advanced can download those spreadsheets and can start talking about the maths behind the ideas. So for example, with the compost cannon project, you can look at how much waste does a person produce each year? How much of that is fertilizer? How many trees could you grow with that fertilizer from each person? It turns out it's about a tennis court of trees each year per person. And you can look at how much gas you can get from our waste, methane gas. You can look at how far that could blast a compost cannonball, how far you could get that, across your suburbs. So all these weird and wonderful calculations are possible. And the intention is, because they're spreadsheets, that the students can download them and they can start playing with the numbers, and they can experiment with their own versions and test out and look at the maths I've done, and then use that to inform their own exploration. So that's one thing. And then, of course, we've got the teacher's notes. So there is quite a substantial document which has activities for all ages, everything from design your own flying bike, design your own compost cannon system. Here's how you might like to do some drawings. Here are some tips for creating your own technical drawings, through to exercises for English teachers to write essays about the future of rewilded cities, through to some maths and some physics and some research and some videos you can watch as extensions and so forth. So any teacher can download the teacher's notes and can immediately jump into a bunch of activities. They can download my calculations, or they can just open the book and just jump into some of the design challenges.
Amazing. Thank you so much for talking about the book with me and sharing all of these fantastic ideas, talking about the process. It's really fascinating, and I think it opens up the possibilities of the book for anyone who might be watching. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy ultra wilding.